appreciate you giving me a few minutes. I won't ask you to do a whole hour. All the best people are very busy. I'm sure you've got a stack that high of things you have to deal with immediately. But I did want to ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind. And if
Yeah.
it's an area you don't want to get into, that's fine. Just wave me off, and I'll do that. Uh, just so that you have a sense of it. I produced a political show called Progressive News Network for 11 years. And I was responding, the progressive Democrats in Florida, which is where I used to live, said, you know what we need? Our progressive voices are not getting any airplay at all on commercial media. We need to find some avenues to get it out. This is before even blogs were in anything in there,
Yeah.
late 80s, early 90s. And I said, well, I'll start producing one. All I need is to have my progressive friends and neighbors come on and talk. And so we did that for 11 years. And
Yeah.
after the end of Trump won, I just said, I got to get away for a bit. I really had it up to there.
Yeah.
And even though I was doing good work and I talked to progressives, I talked to activists, I talked to news people, I talked to scientists, and it was very rewarding, very rewarding.
Mhm.
It's still, I needed to change of pace. So now I produce an international poetry show interviewing authors and stuff.
Oh,
So
do you?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
that's
my
cool.
main project these days. In fact, we just produced a online version of Zoom Merchant of Venice and
Hmm.
Julius Caesar before that. And then, of course, I do a lot of interviews with international writers. So let's go ahead and start talking to you. And it is Terryl Yates, correct?
That's right,
Okay,
Terrell. Hmm.
super. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome a wonderful, caring activist who is instrumental in helping people find their footing, find their voice in what is unquestionably a difficult and tricky time. There are all kinds of challenges to people who think independently, and there's always the concern that people who don't follow the party line, if you will, um, things might get difficult. One of the things that I hearken back to was I started my political activism. I grew up in a little town outside of Pittsburgh called Homestead. It was the site of a very, very famous labor action where people were demanding, imagine, an 8-hour work week and something short of 12 hours a day. And they were rewarded with a massacre. There's a famous Homestead Massacre. So I kind of grew up knowing that when people demanded their rights, when they demanded freedom, when they demanded improvements, sometimes you had to be demanding and you had to stand your ground.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
one last thing I'll say is preface. One of the things that we did during the anti-Vietnam War days, many of us thought it was a bad war idea. It was racist. It was mercantile driven. And of course, the Vietnamese, who were theoretically being helped, found that this great nation from across the planet is blowing them up, what, for their own good. It just seemed not to make any sense. So one of the things we used to help people understand the dilemma was we used teach-ins. We
Hmm.
talked about it because Vietnam was very, very far away. Now, the challenge today is very different. It's very close. So whether you're talking about civil rights, whether you're talking about the rights of women, the rights to health care, the rights to Social Security that people have paid into, these are much closer at home. So
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, I always like to start out when you were a young person, were you were you a student of history? Did you love history? Did you enjoy those stories about American history?
Absolutely. I grew up with two parents that were that were teachers. My father
Oh,
was my father was a history teacher, and we traveled. I grew up just in Washington County, Virginia, and we traveled all over the country. Since they were teachers, we traveled every summer. And my parents liked to discuss issues with us. And They took us to all the historical sites. And I think those early years of really being exposed to things outside the community made me well-rounded, but also gave me a sense of us in a sort of a global perspective. And they always talk to us about issues, always talk to us about the history. And so I was interested early on with history, but always interested in politics. So one of the very first things I did was that when I was probably 13, I'm sure you remember that the news we were getting, the only way we could get in touch with alternative news was with alternative type newspapers,
Yeah.
underground newspapers.
Yeah.
I do not know how in Washington County I was getting my hands on this stuff, but I did. And
Fantastic.
and,
That's a
and
thirsty mind. Oh
yes,
my gosh, I applaud, my dear.
so I started wearing a POW bracelet, and my POW, um, he he ended up coming home, but he was on national news. There'd been a big scene at the airport. He'd attacked his brother because he didn't like his brother's long hair, and it was quite a thing. Um, but I wore the POW bracelet for a long time. And that was probably my first, at the age 13, step into some kind of activism. And I wrote his family and
How
things like
wonderful.
that. Mhm.
Well, you have done the exact thing that so many people miss, making history a personal experience and
Yeah,
talking about the people. Because you and I bet, agree that history is not just about generals. History is about everyday people who are trying to make this a better world.
absolutely. My father, he is such an interesting man. It's a shame you'll never meet him. He loved stories, and so he did a pictorial history of Washington County, Virginia,
Wow.
that's in the library, Washington County Public Library, and different people have copies of it. And it just documents with photographs all these places in the county. And he could drive you around the county. He'd say, "Now here there used to be a mill," and he could see it in his mind, you know. Uh, and it is pretty fascinating.
That's
So
wonderful. Now, these years of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s were very turbulent times
yeah.
when we were really trying to define what contemporary America was going to be. And
Hmm.
were we going to slip back into the pockets of the robber barons, or were we trying to make something much more humane, much more livable, and much more respective of human rights? Now, so
Hmm.
what were some of the early things that you got involved in? I imagine that women's rights and racial equality were
Yeah.
issues that you paid attention to.
That was a big. I mean, I living in Washington County, Virginia, I didn't really have much of an opportunity to participate in local protests or anything of that nature.
Sure,
That just
sure.
weren't, that just wasn't a thing. But we, as family, watched the news every night, and so there was just a constant. The news covered the protests back then, and uh, there was a body count for Vietnam War,
Yep.
and it was
Announced every night. Yeah.
they weren't spending their time talking about the weather on national news, and it was big, and I got fascinated with the civil rights movement, and that was my first thing. My mother was the first teacher in Bristol, Tennessee, to teach a black child when they integrated the schools. And she told that story a lot. It was pretty interesting. She said that that first day when the little girl came, she came with her mother and her pastor, and that they were just really nervous. And when they left, she says that during that whole day, that the other children and that little girl, what they really wanted to do was feel each other's skin. And struck me how amazing that was. But yes, I was very interested in civil rights. Got very interested in the civil rights movement, the passive resistance, the peaceful protest, the importance of it was just really following that. And then it did become about women's rights for me. That became a big focus. And of course, it became very unpopular for a while. And to say you were a feminist might be, it's about the same as saying you were a witch. And so the 80s were tough as far as that was concerned, or the late 80s anyway.
Well,
And
go ahead.
so most of what I did during those years, because I was teaching and raising children, was to try to write and be vocal and to talk to other people about it.
Well, it was such a trying time in so many ways. Uh, there were political forces that were trying to demonize any
Hmm.
progress whatsoever. You mentioned the witch idea. Uh, I remember when the EPA and the first Earth Day, when I and some college friends got together to celebrate. We had a parade for Earth Day,
Hmm.
and there were the name calling when all we were simply trying to say was, let's respect the earth.
I
Let's
know.
not abuse the planet that we live on. And it seemed to me, of course, having been anti-war from the Vietnam War days, I was accustomed to being demonized. I had heard all the epithets, I had things thrown at me and all that stuff. But it just seemed to me that there's a kind of judgmentalism
Yeah.
that's too darn prevalent. And I hate to say this, but I think history really has been taught poorly for so many people.
Yeah. It
And
has
they've
been.
been allowed to think that it's a boring subject, when to me, it is anything but boring. When you think of what the last 1,000 years has meant in terms of individual human rights, we've made some serious progress. And
We
that's,
have.
and
Really?
despite some tug back from conservative forces, or much better said,
Yeah.
radical reactionary forces.
That's
And
correct.
that's such a shame. I have to tell you one little story, and I know you'll appreciate this. One day, I'm a history buff. I read history for fun, and I was reading an encyclopedia about the 20s, and I'm sitting in my grandmother's living room, and I'm looking at a picture of her and my grandfather in their wedding picture right on top of the mantle. And I'm reading 1920s, the women got the right to vote finally, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, my God, she was married that year.
I
That must
know.
have been so amazing, right? So I turned to grandmother and I said, Grandma, that must have been so amazing. I mean, my God, to be there when women finally got a chance to say their choice. And she looked at me, and I got so sad. She said, Ricky, I've never voted. I never thought that I had enough intelligence or knew enough to contribute. So I've never voted. And I thought, here she is. She is a gracious, giving, loving woman, very much a part of her community, active in the church, active in the community, always participating in when people have trouble. She was there. And I thought that giving person didn't feel comfortable. And that's a
No.
shame. That's a shame. Well,
And that's one of the things that I really love about being an activist and organizing the protests is there are still people who come to their first protest. We had a 92-year-old woman come to her first protest just this past weekend. And to be able to facilitate people to express themselves for the first time, to be politically engaged, is just, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful feeling. I
now,
really
now
like
let's
that.
let's talk about our contemporary challenges. One of the things that we thought about a lot during the Vietnam War days was you have to be able to explain the problem
Yes,
effectively. And that's difficult, especially when, if you will, we don't want to play whack-a-mole. We don't want to say, and then they're doing this, and then they're doing this, and then they're, because that I think waters down the concern that we have. How
that's
do
true.
you explain the problem? What is your paradigm? How do you explain to people this is what our concerns are? And of course, they range from A to Z, but how do you focus that?
Well, so again, my father used to say, write what you know. And so whenever I get interviewed by the press, I talk about what I know, which is government, because I taught it for 15 years. And
Wonderful.
so I know government and a little bit about political science because I did teach that briefly, but it was not something I had studied a great deal. So, what I usually do is I stick to that and stay with this is what the legislative branch is doing that I don't like. And lately, I've talked a lot about how they're not checking the power of the president, that we have checks and we have separation of powers that they're not respecting. And because of that, there's an executive overreach. I try not to say Trump
Hmm.
because it's about a bigger thing. Now, I do, if there's something big in the news, like the big, beautiful bill,
Boy, is there a misname there, huh?
yeah, I try to encourage people to, to message about that. So, messaging in this day and age is difficult because, just like you've pointed out, take your pick. We have a protest every twice a week on People Street in Johnson City. And there's not a theme. It's just people's power on People's Street. So it's just your voice, whatever it is you want to say. And so a lot of it's anti-Trump. A lot of it is has to do with the rights that people are losing, immigration. Um, the tariffs are big, SNAP, Medicaid, all the things that are right now in the news, you'll see on people's signs. But I do like it when we have consistent messaging. And generally, when I organize a protest, I tried to give some guidance, but I'll also say I'm not the sign police. You know, my
Absolutely.
husband, I don't know if, can I curse on here?
Sure, absolutely. Speak
My
freely, my
husband's
dear.
husband's sign says Trump is batshit crazy.
You
And
know,
that's his message. He's crazy.
and it's a valid message, that's for sure. One of the things that I've found funny, I actually worked done a lot of coalition building,
Yeah.
especially during the Iraq wars, and we had from religious groups to humanist groups, all kinds of people, and we actually wrote up a set of guidelines for best behavior on a picket line.
Hmm.
One of the things that I tried to um, diffuse whenever possible is people that would angrily call for peace. And I said, I appreciate your voice for peace. I do. And I am as passionate as anyone. I said, but you're modeling the wrong behavior
Right.
when you shout angrily for peace. And I feel the same way about people who put up hate signs. They
Hmm.
hate this or they hate Trump or whatever. And I said,
Right.
to me, and again, I'm not in step at all, but to me, it's missing the point to blame it on one person because that
Right.
person is just a figurehead. He's doing his job per se,
Hmm.
and personally, I don't care about that person. What I care about are the policies that he's
Yes,
promoting and producing.
absolutely.
That's my problem with
We
this
need to
situation.
be focusing on the Republican Party and what policies are coming down and what they're going along with that any other time they would not have done that. So it's a sad time. I think that you hit on something that I really like to talk about with the people in my group, which is how are we peaceful? How do we make a protest peaceful? How do we keep it peaceful? And honestly, always have to explain this, but what I tell them is it's going to be peaceful because we're peaceful. And as long as we're peaceful, it'll be peaceful. But the minute we start to react and start and act and, return fire with fire, return angry words with more angry words, then we're no longer peaceful. Now people are just humans and they have emotions and they have to be reminded. But what I like to do is to have everybody to be in good mood when they come. I want them to have a peace. I want them to have joy. So I listen to Simon Rosenberg. He's got a Substack, and we're followers. And he does a an hour each week where he talks to his followers. And he talked last night about how the protests really didn't look like protests to him. They looked more like parties, as people were having so much fun. And that's what I like to do. I like to have things we hand out to them, flags and clappers, and I really want them to have high energy and feel good and come back.
Well,
Um,
that reminds me of a point that I want to make in our little discussion. You have done such a wonderful job pulling that together. The No Kings rally was
it
fantastic,
was, it was
fantastic. And
part of that was luck, and part
well, no, it was skill and intelligence and commitment. I can tell you, I've been there. I've done that. Well,
well, I have always had a knack for organizing. Even in high school, I was always able to organize things that other people were confused by. Um, and then as I had more and more experience with that, I started doing little productions, big parties, big events. I organized weddings, I hated wedding directing. I quit that. I said, no way, no more. Um, Huge things. I mean, at school, sometimes I would organize something for the whole school. I mean, it just became a thing I did, and I was always able to sort of see where the problems might be and always worked on prevention. That's one of the reasons I talk to my crew so much about peace and joy, and because that's how we prevent these things. Don't go in angry, go in with a positive, loving feeling.
well, I was production manager of a concert and festival company, so I know
Okay.
exactly. And my boss used to joke with me. I had 130 questions that I asked myself with every event. And he'd go,
Yeah.
"Why do you do that?" I said, "Because if you anticipate everything that can be anticipated, then you
Yeah.
have time and you have room to deal with the things that come up because something's
Right.
going to come up."
That's right. You've got a plan. Now, what happened with the No Kings is that we got moved at the last minute. So I had gone through all of this careful thought about the mall. And I like to visit the place where we're going to have an event
Of
in
course,
person.
of course.
So you can look online, but it's nothing like actually standing there.
Right, right.
So I like to walk it, is what I call. So I like to walk around and see, okay, here's a place in the curb is a problem. And it never fails that whenever I don't get to do that, I struggle more with the event. It doesn't mean it doesn't go well. It just means that it becomes harder on the ground. And that's what happened that day is that I, because of the last minute change, the mall didn't want us there. And so
Yeah,
they called the police, and the police called us, and everybody was very nice. They facilitated us moving to another place that was better.
yeah.
Uh, and people had a blast at that park. But I hadn't been able to think through some of the things like the crossings and, you know, the bathroom, how far the bathroom was, and all those things that normally I would have given quite a bit of thought to.
Well, I just have to tell you, having done more than my share of events, I thought you you need to pat yourself on the back, dear. If nobody
Well,
else is
thank
doing it,
you very
because you did
much.
a marvelous job, marvelous job.
I think people had such a good time. And what I tell my party is when I talk about this with them, and a lot of people say, "Well, I don't understand. I don't know why it's a big deal about protesting, not doing good." I said, "Yes, it does. that people who leave those protests are now going to go do something else. They might be the first time that now that they've been empowered, they're more likely to write their congressman, call them, vote, talk to somebody else about going to a protest. And so you go from having 20 people on a street to having hundreds, and it's you what you're it just builds. And the nature of a group is that the bigger the group, the bigger the group. It's just the whole bandwagon effect. And so
Yeah.
if you've got large events, then the next events are going to be even larger. And that's what causes the movement to grow. Now, our current person occupying the White House understands this.
Yeah.
And it's part of his success with those big rallies. Look at what he did. He didn't talk policy. He
No.
bored those people to death. He entertained them.
Yeah.
He was entertaining, at least with doing the goofy little dance. They think he's funny. They think he's entertaining. They do all this big music. They gets them, he gets them charged up. And
Yep.
so I think there's something to learn from that. I really do.
One of the things that I have noticed over the years is, especially in unpopular wars, uh, when Iraq 1 and 2 both started, they were very, the public had been primed to support it.
Yeah.
And and over, I heard when I was out there with a few hardy souls protesting it, people would stop and say, "Thank you, you're standing there for me." And
Yes.
every time you hear that, you know, just like you said, that somebody who's going to amplify the message, who's more comfortable next time participating, and it brings people along. I absolutely agree. I think that's absolutely marvelous. Now, let me ask you this. If you were to, and I, like I said, I know it's a whole panoply of things, but if you were going to try to put your finger on the place where people are going to notice the pinch point first, do you think it's elder care? Do you think it's Social Security? Do you think it's food? Do you think it's the poor? Do you think it's the fact that they're rounding up all these non-dangerous, non-criminals and grad students for
Uh,
speaking out? There's so many issues. What do you think is going to
hmm.
touch people first?
I I think the I think it's going to be the economy. Um, we're in trouble. Our economy's in trouble, and there's signs there, and businesses are concerned. And I think if the economy crashes, which I think could happen, then everybody's going to take notice of that. And I think it will be unmistakable. And there will be segments of the society that will be hurt by loss of health care. There will be segments who will lose their SNAP, their Medicaid. And down the road, if they do pass this big bill, as we all know, they'll make cuts to Medicare. But that slow change will be difficult for people to understand and wrap their mind around because they don't pay enough attention. Immigration, that only hurts if you know people who are getting snatched. And otherwise, a lot of people just aren't empathetic enough to to really care about that. So my husband's hoping for a crash. He's not exactly hoping for it so much as
Right.
he thinks that's
Well,
maybe what it's going to take.
there's an expression that says every catastrophe is an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I understand that thinking, and it certainly has its
Mhm.
validity, that's for sure. I don't want to keep you too long, so let me ask you, if you want to have one final message, one kind of summing up that you want to leave people with, what's your thought?
Get out there. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about what everybody else needs to be doing. I'm so sick of people complaining about their Democratic leaders. I mean, you don't like what your Democratic leader is doing? Run for office. Join a protest. Write a letter. I mean, stop. Think about what President Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do, yes, but what you can do for your country. We all need to step up. And you don't have to be, into it like I am, with living and breathing it all day long. But what did you do this week? Did you do anything? Did you call anybody? And once you've started doing something every week, maybe start doing something every day and just keep it up, because it's the small acts that chip, 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 chip away at that brick wall. And but we all have to be doing it. It can't just be some of us. It can't be just 2% or 3% or whatever magic number that they come up with this week. It's 3.5%.
Well,
It's good.
thank you so very much for your time. Thank you for your wisdom and your commitment to making this country better.
I
I
appreciate you. Thank you for asking me to be here tonight.
Okay, well, let's do this again. Thanks, dear.
Okay, thank you. You have a great day.
You too. The democratic spirit is alive in Kingsport, Tennessee. On a hot noonday, on No King's Day, here in Tennessee. The democratic spirit is alive and well. The last count I heard was over 900. So, seeing two superheroes here, I have to ask my question. Sir, what brings you here?
I'm here to protest that no one is illegal on stolen ground. There are no kings in America. If you have superheroes against you, you fucked up.
Thank you so much. May I ask you, Flash, what brings you here?
I'm for freedom for all, obviously. Superheroes were created in the 1930s as a stand against fascism during World War II. That's why Superman exists, that's why the Flash exists, that's why all of these characters exist. I thought this would bring attention to it, and it's, I don't know, best thing I can think to do.
Thank you so very much. Could you tell us why you're here?
Yes, I'm here because I want people to see so many people who are out there, so if they're afraid to come out, they know that they have support. We got your back. Come on out and join us.
Thank you so much. May I ask you why you're here?
The fight for human rights.
Thank you so very much. Hi, thanks for talking to me. Could you tell me why you're here?
The reason I'm here today is just because of all of the different things that are going on right now, about all of the people being taken by ICE, about all of the rules that are being broken, and how Donald Trump is basically just acting like a king, pretty much.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
What brought you here, brother?
Common damn decency, really. I can't stand by and watch these neo-Nazis, really, destroy this country and oppress people who have done no harm.
Absolutely.
And it's not just immigrants, both legal and illegal, because how many of them have been deported going to their court cases? It's a high number. So this argument about legal and illegal, you're full of shit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir.
I'm here for democracy, bringing America back to it.
Thank you so very much. Much appreciated. You're talking to me? Excuse me, why are you here?
Human rights.
The right to burn a lot of gas. Thanks a lot. Sir, could you tell me why you're here?
I'm here because I'm worried about our country. I'm worried about democracy. I'm worried about that our government is failing. And I think we need to turn it around.
Thank you so very much, sir. Tell me, why are you here, ma'am?
Because incompetent criminals are running our government. And I do mean ruining, not running our government.
Thank you so much. Sir, can I ask you a question? Why are you here?
I'm here to stand up for my First Amendment right, and there are no tyrants, no kings in America.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for joining me. Can I ask you why you're here?
I'm here because President Trump has broken the Constitution in so many ways that if I don't speak up, I will explode.
Thank you so much. It's only we the people when we participate.
Absolutely.
Thank you again.
It's not going to be as impressive now because all the people are leaving, but still.
Still impressive.
Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Donald Trump has got to go. Hey, hey. The sign said, "Don't blame me, I voted for Trump." Yeah.
Protect the Constitution! Woo! Protect the Constitution! Protect the Constitution! Protect the
I take my whiskey neat, no ice. Yeah, same idea. Nice one, nice one.
Jesus would be on this side! Jesus would be on this side!
Sir, could you tell us why you're here?
I'm here to stand up for the situation going on with America right now, the mass deportation of immigrants, and the racism, fascism is just not acceptable, and I'm here to stand up for it.
Thank you so much, sir. Sir, could you tell me why you're here?
Well, the situation going on in America right now it's not just, it's wrong. I feel like immigrants shouldn't be deported, and back in World War II with the Japanese Americans, after Pearl Harbor, they were put in camps, and I think that's wrong, and we're just kind of circling back. History repeats itself.
Thank you so very much, sir.
Yep.